Welcome to session 12 of our study of the book of Genesis. In this session, we will read chapters 35, 36, and 37. Jacob returns to Bethel and builds an altar to the Lord. Rachel gives birth to another son. We have the death of Isaac. We have another major genealogy, this time the lineage of Esau. The Jacob narratives come to an end, and we begin the Joseph narratives. We read the story of the dreamer Joseph in his wonderful coat. But first, we begin with a prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So we begin with chapter 35. After Jacob's disastrous inaction in response to his daughter's rape in the face of his vengeful sons, this chapter is a collection of miscellaneous stories about Jacob and his household. The consecration of the altar at Bethel, the death of Rebekah's nurse, a reiteration of Jacob's name change coupled with a repetition of the covenantal promise delivered to his father and his grandfather before him, Rachel's death in childbirth, Reuben's cohabitation with his father's concubine, the death of Isaac. There is a lot here. This miscellaneous overview of Jacob's later career just before his sons entirely preempt the narrative has all the indications of a literary source different from the chapter we just read. Chapter 34, the story of the rape of Dinah and the destruction of Shechem, was entirely from the Yahweh source, the J source. Chapter 35, that we're just starting, is mostly divided between the P source and the E source, with just a pair of verses probably from J. Nevertheless, the themes from the catastrophe at Shechem seem to bounce all through this chapter that we're starting with today. So chapter 35, verse 1 through 7. And God said to Jacob, "Rise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from Esau your brother." And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the alien gods that are in your midst, and cleanse yourselves, and change your garments. And let us rise up and go up to Bethel, and I shall make an altar there to the God who answered me on the day of my distress, and was with me on the way that I went." And they gave Jacob all the alien gods that were in their hands, and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the terebinth that is by Shechem. And they journeyed onward, and the terror of God was upon the towns around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And Jacob came to Luz in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people who were with him. And he built there an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, for their God was revealed to him when he fled from his brother. So this refers back to the dream or vision that he had back in chapter 28, when he was on his way to Padamaram, to Mesopotamia. Building the altar is ritual completion of that early promise that Jacob made in Bethel on his way to Padamaram to see Laban. The alien gods that Jacob talks about here could be some of the booty from Shechem, but more likely they were the household gods or cultic figures that Rachel and some of the other servants brought from Mesopotamia. Jacob largely confirms that God has met his precondition back in chapter 28 when Jacob said, "If the Lord God be with me and guard me on this way that I am going, then the Lord will be my God." The phrase, "the terror of God," here simply means that God casts fear on the Canaanites in order to protect Jacob, but it is deliberately ambiguous in this setting. It could be using Elohim as an intensifier, referring to the shambles in which Simeon and Levi left the town of Shechem. That by itself should be enough to scare most of the other towns in the area. We go on with 8 through 11. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel under the oak, and its name was called Alan Bakuth. And God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padamaram, and he blessed him, and God said to him, "Your name Jacob, no longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." And he called his name Israel, and God said to him, "I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and assembly of nations shall stem from you, and kings shall come forth from your loins." Alan Bakuth The place where Rebekah's nurse is buried means something like Oak of Weeping. Why we have this random story here is unknown. Perhaps this is a hint that Rebekah also has died. We don't hear any more about Rebekah in Genesis. This is more of an official name change that we hear in this section. Jacob is back at Bethel where he first heard from God. The first name change story, the wrestling match, was kind of a folkloric and mysterious. Here the name change is theological. God uses the words of the first creation, be fruitful and multiply. There is nothing here about Jacob struggling or wrestling. This is a promise about Jacob's, Israel's future. We hear God saying, I am El Shaddai. Isaac used El Shaddai when he blessed Jacob back in chapter 28, when he sent him on to Laban in Mesopotamia. God came to Abraham in chapter 17 and said, I am El Shaddai, when he granted a covenant to Abraham. All three times El Shaddai is used or thought to be in the priestly narrative. We go on with verse 12 through 15. And the land that I gave to Abraham, to Isaac, to you, I will give it, and to your seed after you, I will give the land. And God ascended from him in the place where he had spoken with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone, and he offered libation upon it and poured oil on it. And Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him, Bethel. So here's kind of a repeat of the first meeting at Bethel where Jacob set up a pillar and poured oil on it and called the name of the place Bethel. 3 times in a row we hear the place where he had spoken to him. The word place was used over and over again the first time Jacob was in Bethel. Here, place is somehow tied to God speaking with Jacob. We go on with 16 through 20. And they journeyed onward from Bethel. And when they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel gave birth, and she labored hard in the birth. And it happened, when she was laboring hardest in the birth, that the midwife said to her, Fear not, for this one too is a son for you. And it happened, as her life ran out, for she was dying, that she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died, and she was buried on the road to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar on her grave. It is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. So Ben-Ani can mean son of my vigor or son of my sorrow. That's the name Rachel gave the new son. Benjamin means son of the right hand. So it could mean favored son or dweller of the south, because the right was considered to be the south. We have competing names here, one from the mother and one from the father. The mother has died. We go on with verse 21 through 22. And Israel journeyed onward and pitched his tent on the far side of the Migdal Eder. And it happened when Israel was encamped in the land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard. The Talmud saw in this story Reuben's intention to defile the slave girl of his mother Leah's dead rival, so to make her at the same time sexually taboo to Jacob. Reuben may also have been attempting to seize in his father's lifetime his firstborn rights to be head of the clan. Just as in the rape of Dinah, Israel stay silent. We go on with 23 through 26. And the sons of Jacob were 12, the sons of Leah, Jacob's firstborn, Reuben and Simeon and Levi and Judah, and Ishkar and Zebulun, the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's slave girl, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Paddan Aram. Of course, Benjamin was not born in Paddan Aram. The listing of sons of Jacob at this point parallels that of the sons of Esau in the next chapter. This is another indicator that we're shifting the narrative away from Jacob towards his sons. And we go on with 27 through 29. And Jacob came to Isaac his father in Mamre at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. And Isaac's days were 180 years. And Isaac breathed his last, and died, and was gathered to his kin, old and sated with years. And Esau and Jacob his sons buried him. This is the death of Isaac. Chronologically in the story, we don't know when Isaac died. Isaac would have been over 160 years old when Jacob returned to Canaan, so he could have died well before some of the other events in this chapter. We read that Esau and Jacob buried him, just as Isaac and Ishmael buried Abraham. We move on to chapter 36. Chapter 36 gives us the last of the major genealogies in Genesis. These lists of generations and kings were important to the ancient audience and served as a way of accounting for historical and political configurations. Where did the leaders of this country come from? Where did this country come from? Where did these people come from? Virtually the only evidence we have about a settlement in Edom is in this particular chapter, chapter 36. As a literary tool, genealogies mark the end of a long narrative unit. This genealogy of Esau is parallel to the genealogy of Ishmael in chapter 25. Following this chapter, we begin another long narrative unit, the story of Joseph, that takes us to the end of the book of Genesis. This chapter also serves to shore up the narrative geographically to the east before turning attention to the south. Apart from the brief narrative in chapter 12 when Abraham traveled to Egypt, which is meant to foreshadow the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus, the significant movement has all been eastward across the Jordan to Mesopotamia and back again. Esau now makes his permanent move from Canaan to Edom, the mountainous region east of Canaan, south of the Dead Sea and stretching down toward the Gulf of Aqaba. Once this report is finished, we return our attention first to Canaan and then eventually to Egypt. We begin with verses 1 through 8, chapter 36. And this is the lineage of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the daughters of Canaan, Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Obahamah, daughter of Anah, son of Zibeon the Hivite, and Basemath, daughter of Ishmael, sister of Nebaioth. And Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz, while Basemath bore Reuel, and Obalamah bore Jehush, and Jalam, and Korath. These are the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. And Esau took his wives, and his sons, and his daughters, and all the folk of his household, and his livestock, and all his cattle, and all the goods he had gotten in the land of Canaan. And he went to another land away from Jacob his brother. For their substance was too great for dwelling together, and the land of their sojournings could not support them, because of their livestock. And Esau settled in the high country of Seir. Esau, that is Edom. So this is the first of 6 different lists here, perhaps drawn from 6 different sources by the editor that make up chapter 36. There is both overlap and inconsistency among the different lists. This is the first list that focuses on Esau's wives. Esau concedes Canaan to his brother Jacob and moves his people to the southeast. The timing of the story is not really clear. That is, Esau was already in Seir, the mountains of Edom, when Jacob returned from Mesopotamia. It's possible that he moved back to Canaan, stayed there for a while, then returned to Edom. We're also reading narratives from different sources, so we could not expect total consistency with this. We go on with 9 through 14. And this is the lineage of Esau, father of Edom, in the high country of Seir. And these are the names of the sons of Esau. Eliphaz, son of Adah, Esau's wife. Reuel, son of Basemath, Esau's wife. And the sons of Eliphaz were Timon, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. And Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, son of Esau. She bore to Eliphaz Amalek. These are the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Reuel, Nahath, and Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the sons of Basemath, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Esau's wife, Obimalah, daughter of Anah, son of Zibeon. She bore to Esau Jehush and Jalam and Korah. So the second list is a genealogical list focusing more on the sons than on the wives. They're both in there, but just a little different focus. We go on to 15 through 19. These are the chieftains of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, firstborn of Esau, the chieftain of Timon, the chieftain Omar, the chieftain Zepho, the chieftain Kenaz, the chieftain Korah, the chieftain Gadam, the chieftain Amalek. These are the chieftains of Ephelas, the land of Edom. These are the sons of Adon. These are the sons of Reuel, son of Esau, the chieftain Nahath, the chieftain Zerah, the chieftain Shammah, the chieftain Mizah. These are the chieftains of Reuel in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Basmath, Esau's wife, and these are the sons of Oholibamah, Esau's wife, the chieftain Jehush, the chieftain Jalam, the chieftain Korah. These are the chieftains of Obimalah, daughter of Anah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these their chieftains. So this third unit is a list of the chieftains descended from Esau, which is a little bit different, but chieftains they're called in this one. We go on to 20 through 30. These are the sons of Seir, the Horite, who had settled in the land, Lotan and Shobal and Zibon and Anah and Dishon and Ezer and Dishan. These are the Horite chieftains, sons of Seir in the land of Edom, and the sons of Lotan were Hori and Hermon, and Lotan's sister was Timnah. And these are the sons of Shobal, Alvan and Manoth, and Elbal and Shepo and Onam. These are the sons of Zibeon, Ayah, and Anah. He is Anah who found the water in the wilderness when he took the asses of his father Zibeon to graze. And these are the children of Anah, Dishon and Obalamah, daughter of Anah. And these are the sons of Dishon, Himdan and Ishban and Ithran and Cheran. These are the sons of Ezer, Bilhan and Zavar and Akan. These are the sons of Dishan, Uz and Aran. These are the Horite chieftains, and the chieftain Lotan, and the chieftain Shobal, and the chieftain Zibeon, the chieftain Anah, the chieftain Dishon, the chieftain Ezer, the chieftain Dishan. These are the Horite chieftains by their clans in the land of Seir. So this is a list of Horite inhabitants of Edom. Horites is interchangeable with Hittites. These people were probably the Urians, a people who came to this area from Armenia sometime in the first half of the second millennium BCE, between 1500 and 2000. They seem to have assimilated into the local population because they all have West Semitic names. These people were here before Esau came. So we go on with 31 through 39. These are the kings that reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. And Bela, son of Beor, reigned in Edom, and the name of his city was Dinhabah. And Bela died, and Jobab, son of Zerah from Boras, reigned in his stead. And Jobab died, and Husham from the land of Timonite reigned in his stead. And the Husham died, and Hedom, son of Bedad, reigned in his stead. And he who struck down the Midian in the steppe of Moab, and the name of the city was Everett. And Hadad died, and Samalah of Maskarah reigned in his stead. And Samalah died, and Saul from Rehoboth on the river reigned in his stead. And Saul died, and Balahanan, son of Achbor, reigned in his stead. And Balahanan, son of Achbor, died, and Hadad reigned in his stead. And the name of his city was Pau. And the name of his wife was Metelbaal, daughter of Metred, daughter of Me-Zahab. So this is a list of the kings of Edom. They don't represent a dynasty because some of their successors, because none of the successors to the throne is a son of his predecessor. They're all the kings. We go on with 40 through 43. And these are the names of the chieftains of Esau by their clans and places by name, the chieftains of Timnah, the chieftain Alav, the chieftain Jetheth, the chieftain Obalamah, the chieftain Elah, the chieftain Pinion, the chieftain Kenaz, the chieftain Timon, the chieftain Mibzar, the chieftain Magdal, the chieftain Aram. Those are the chieftains of Edom by their settlements in the land of their holdings. That is Esau, father of Edom. This last list is a record of the chieftains descended from Esau. If you've been listening closely and keeping up, you'll notice that most of the names are different from the list of chieftains that we read earlier. I'm sure you've been keeping up. With chapter 36, we end the Jacob narratives, and we start with the Joseph narratives, beginning with chapter 37. I want to make clear that Joseph doesn't die at the end of chapter 36. He doesn't go anywhere. He just has a much smaller role. He's still going to be making speeches as late as chapter 49, and we're only to chapter 37. But here we go. And we begin with verse 1 through 4. And Jacob dwelled in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. This is the lineage of Jacob. Joseph, 17 years old, was tending the flock with his brothers, assisting the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, the wives of his father. And Joseph brought ill reports of them to their father. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, for he was the child of his old age. And he made him an ornamented tunic. And his brothers saw it was he their father loved more than all his brothers. And they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So we've just read that the chieftains of Esau lived in the high country of Seir. We've contrasted that with Jacob living in Canaan, which is the chosen land, because he is the chosen son here. By the lineage of Jacob that it starts this passage with, this means that these are the events that happened to him and the incidents that befell him. We're not ready to hear another genealogy right now. Joseph is working as a kind of apprentice shepherd with his older brothers. We have the image of a spoiled younger child who is somewhat of a tattletale. It's interesting that we hear Joseph's is his father's favorite immediately after we hear about questionable behavior on Joseph's part. He gave bad reports to his father. We also hear that Jacob made Joseph an ornamented tunic. Fox calls it an ornamented coat. Friedman calls it the traditional coat of many colors. All three admit that the Hebrew term is obscure. In the story of the rape of Tamar in 2 Samuel 13, she is wearing a garment of the same name, Ketonet Pasam. There are also a lot of other pointed allusions to this Joseph story in the Tamar narrative. But other than that, they both wear the same kind of coat. No one is sure exactly what kind of coat this is. We move on to verse 5 through 8. And Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers, and they hated him all the more. And he said to them, "Listen, pray to this dream that I dreamed. And look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and look, my sheaf arose and actually stood up. And look, your sheaves drew round and bowed to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule us?" And they hated him all the more for his dreams and for his words. The dreams in the Joseph story have a more secular orientation compared to earlier stories in Genesis. They are not direct messages from God like the dreams of Abimelech or Jacob. They require some interpretation, and they may also reflect the hidden desires of the dreamer. Joseph is not only somewhat spoiled, but seems to be a little bit self-absorbed, maybe somewhat of a narcissist. He thinks everyone else will be amazed by his wonderful dreams. His brothers hated him for his dreams, but mostly on his insistence on talking about them. We go on with 9 through 11. And he dreamed yet another dream, and recounted it to his brothers. And he said, "Look, I dreamed a dream again, and look, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing to me." And he recounted it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall we really come, I, your mother, and your brothers, to bow before you to the ground?" And his brothers were jealous of him, while his father kept the thing in mind. So doublets like Two dreams in a row are a recurring principle of organization in the Joseph story, just like dividing everything in two parts was in the Jacob story. There will be a lot of double dreams. The brothers make 2 trips to Egypt. Joseph is thrown into a pit and then into a prison cell. Jacob's reference to your mother here seems a little strange. Rachel is Joseph's mother. But if the 11 stars represent the 11 brothers, that would include his younger brother Benjamin, which means Rachel, his mother, is already dead. Strange. Eventually, Joseph will discover that he can interpret other people's dreams, but not his own. He may think he understands what this means, but he may not. We go on with chapter 37, 12 through 20. And his brothers went to graze their father's flock at Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "You know your brothers are pasturing at Shechem. Come, let me send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." And he said to him, "Go pray to see how your brothers fare, and how the flock fares, and bring me back word." And he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him, and look, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What is it you seek?" And he said, "My brothers I seek. Tell me, pray, where are they pasturing?" And the man said, "They have journeyed on from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" And Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And they saw him from afar before he drew near them. And they plotted against him to put him to death. And they said to each other, "Here comes that dream master. And so now let us kill him and fling him into one of the pits. And we can say a vicious beast has devoured him. And we shall see what will come of his dreams." So Shechem has already been linked with disaster in these stories. When he gets to Shechem, a man finds him wandering in the fields and tells him where his brothers have gone. His brothers have gone up to Dothan. It is over 40 miles from Hebron to Shechem, and then maybe another 10 miles on north to Dothan. This isn't like going out in the backyard and hollering over the fence. This was a long trip. We don't know who the man was that Joseph talked with. We do know that the question and answer in a field outside Shechem reinforces the sense that Joseph is being directed to a disastrous encounter. His brothers start with sarcastically calling him the dream master. Then not only plan to kill him, but throw his body into a pit. They aren't even going to bury him. We've seen what Simeon and Levi did in Shechem. These guys are brutal. We go on with 21 through 28. And Reuben heard and came to his rescue and said, "We must not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Fling him into the pit in this wilderness, and do not raise a hand against him, that he might rescue him from their hands to bring him back to his father." And it happened when Joseph came to his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the ornamented tunic that he had on him, and they took him and flung him into the pit. And the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they raised their eyes and saw, and look, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, their camels bearing gum and balm and ladanum, on their way to take down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, "What gain is there if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and our hand will not be against him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed, and the Midianite merchantmen passed by and pulled Joseph up out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph to Egypt. So Reuben doesn't even use the word kill here when he first finds about what this plot is. He doesn't want to take his life or shed blood. They're going to fling him into a pit. This is the same term used for Hagar when she flings Ishmael under a bush. Joseph had the poor judgment to wear the ornamented tunic that was like rubbing salt in the wounds to his brothers. They stripped him of the coat and threw him into the pit. We hear a caravan of Ishmaelites came along. Ishmael may have still been alive at this time. This is probably a generic term for semi-nomadic traders of Arab stock east of the Jordan. Any actual Ishmaelites would have been the brothers' second cousins, and not likely found in a trading trading caravan in Canaan. Judah offers up a different reason for not killing Joseph. Reuben was concerned about the horror of shedding blood. Judah simply says they have nothing to gain. After all, he's our brother. Let's just sell him into slavery. In verse 28, Midianite merchantmen suddenly appear, and because the brothers don't want to get their hands dirty, ask the Midianites to pull Joseph out of the pit and sell him to the Ishmaelites. Doesn't make a lot of sense. This may have been an attempt by the editor to blend two versions of the same story, one involving Ishmaelites and one Midianites. If you remember, Midianites were descendants of Abraham by his concubine Keturah after Sarah died. So we're getting the whole family together here. Midian, like Ishmael, was Jacob's uncle, Isaac's half-brother. We go on with 29 through 35. And Reuben came back to the pit, and look, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his garments and came back to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where can I turn?" And they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a kid and dipped the tunic in the blood, and they sent the ornamented tunic and had it brought to their father. And they said, "This we found. Recognize, pray, is it your son's tunic or not?" And he recognized it, and he said, "It is my son's tunic. A vicious beast has devoured him. Joseph is torn to shreds." And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth round his waist and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose to console him, and he refused to be consoled. And he said, "Rather I will go down to my son in Sheol mourning." And his father keened for him. So when Reuben came back to the pit, we've never heard anything about Reuben leaving, but nevertheless he is back. Again, perhaps the redactor has combined two different stories and had to leave some parts out. Chapter 37 seemed to be primarily a mixture of source J and source E that repeatedly goes back and forth between the two sources, maybe a dozen times. The P source and the redactor each get a little verse in here. Reuben and Judah, the two defenders of Jacob in this narrative, and Simeon and Levi, the cold-blooded killers from the Shechem story, are Leah's four oldest sons. Other than Joseph, we haven't heard much from the other seven. So they slaughter a kid and dip the tunic in its blood and deceive their father Jacob, just as Jacob had used a slaughtered kid in a garment that belonged to his brother to deceive his father Isaac when he stole his brother's blessing. Jacob recognized the tunic. Isaac did not recognize his son Jacob. So Jacob immediately draws the intended false conclusion that his son had been shredded by a vicious beast. We go on with verse 36. But the Midianites had sold him into Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's courtier, the high chamberlain. Potiphar was a high official, although his actual duties are not really clear here. It says high chamberlain, I'm not sure exactly what that is. Here we are told that the Midianites sold Joseph to Potiphar. Back in verse 28, it seemed like the Midianites sold him to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. It appears that in the first part of verse 28, where the Midianites pulled Joseph out of the pit, was from the E source, as was verse 36, where they sold him to Potiphar, the verse we just read. The second half of verse 28, where it says they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites, was from the J source, and they refers to Joseph's brothers. The stories about the last patriarch form a coherent whole, however. It stands well on its own, although it has been consciously woven into both the Jacob cycle and the entire book. Initially, the tale is one of family emotions, and is in fact extreme emotions which give it a distinctive flavor. All the major characters are painfully expressive of their feelings, from the doting father to the spoiled son, from the malicious brothers to the lustful wife of Potiphar, from the nostalgic adult Joseph to the grief-stricken and old Jacob. It's only through the subconscious medium of dreams that we are made to realize a higher plan is at work, which will supersede the destructive force of all these emotions. In many ways, the Joseph narrative repeats elements of the Jacob tradition. There is sibling hatred, exile of the hero, love and hate, dreams and deception, even so detailed as to repeat the goat kid deception. But it's focusing on the classic rags to riches plot, with the addition of a moralistic theme that make this Joseph story a distinctive as well as a popular tale. Next week we read chapters 38 through 41. We have the story of Judah and Tamar. Joseph is in Egypt, where he is thrown into prison after tangling with the wife of Potiphar, and he begins to interpret dreams. But until then, be safe, and I hope to see you Wednesday.